Hey, it's Trevor Hamaker, creator of Better Youth Ministry. I'm glad you're checking out this video. If you like it, I'd love for you to subscribe. That way you don't miss any of the future videos that I put together. Now, this video is all about how to grow your youth group. I've got 4 simple strategies to share, and this whole concept came about. I was looking through social media and seeing these big churches, and they posted these pictures about all these new students that show up at their church. They're sharing stories about all the kids getting saved and baptized in their ministries. And, I pictured you sitting there, maybe at a little bit smaller church, maybe a mid-sized church, and you like their photos on social media, but you wonder, why aren't any new students showing up to my ministry? And so that's what I want to help you answer in this video, because the answer might be more sociological and less spiritual than you think. So here's a sociologist's perspective. Rodney Stark is a sociologist at Baylor University. He's done extensive research on how Christianity spread in its first 300 years. In his book, The Rise of Christianity, he explains the basis for successful conversionist movements is growth through social networks, through a structure of direct and intimate interpersonal attachments. Most new religious movements fail because they quickly become closed or semi-closed networks. That is, they fail to keep forming and sustaining attachments to outsiders and thereby lose the capacity to grow. Successful movements discover techniques for remaining open networks. Did you catch that? There was a lot going on in those sentences, so I just want to pause there. The Christian message spread as far as it did, as fast as it did, at least in part, because Christians maintained relationships with non-Christians. The first Christians didn't isolate themselves and cut themselves off from other people. They remained enmeshed in the world, even while living different from the world. So I wonder, could it be that your students don't invite non-Christian friends because they don't have any non-Christian friends? So that's the sociological perspective. Here's the pastor's perspective. Dan Kimball is a pastor who wrote a book called They Like Jesus But Not the Church. And in that book, he says the longer we are Christians, the fewer the number of friends we have who are not Christians. Even though Christians often work alongside non-Christians or have non-Christian neighbors or sit next to non-believing students in class, we generally tend not to befriend them or pray regularly for them or get involved with their lives so they trust us. And then Kimball asks, if Jesus sent us on a mission to be his salt and light to others, why is it that we have basically set up our church systems and subcultures to remove maturing people from relationships with people outside the church? That's a good question, and it's worth thinking about. Do you think that your church's schedule, systems, and subculture keeps people from forming meaningful relationships with outsiders? So then I thought about a different question. When I consider Stark's sociological data and Kimball's pastoral observations, it seems like the question of how to grow your group might not be the right question to start with. Maybe the better question to start with is, what can you do to keep your group from becoming closed to outsiders? And I have a few ideas that I want to share with you about that. So here we go, 4 strategies to stay open to outsiders and grow your youth group. Number 1, encourage your students to pray for their non-Christian friends. When students pray for their friends, they're more inclined to look for ways that God is working in their friends' lives. They're also more likely to strike up a spiritual conversation with those friends or invite them to something that's going on in your ministry that might appeal to them. On the other hand, if your students aren't actively praying for their non-Christian friends, they're far less likely to invite them to anything your ministry does. Number 2, encourage your students to bless their non-Christian friends. In his book, Surprise the World, Michael Frost lists blessing others as the first habit of missional people. He says, I'd like you to bless 3 people each week, at least one of whom is a member of your church, and at least one of whom is not. The third can be from either category. What can your students do to bless their non-Christian friends? I think the easiest thing they can do is offer words of encouragement. These could take the form of notes or texts or compliments. Anything will do. The point is to help them think about being a blessing to people who don't believe. When their prayers are combined with those acts of blessing, they'll be primed to take on the next strategy. Number 3, encourage your students to invite their non-Christian friends. Now, you're probably already doing this. I regularly get emails from youth pastors across the country who tell me that their students just don't invite their friends. So my advice is this. First, emphasize the first 2 strategies before this one. Second, make sure you're doing things in your ministry that make it easy for your students to invite their non-Christian friends and easy for their non-Christian friends to say yes. For some reason, some people don't agree with that last statement. Those people will continue to wonder why new students and non-Christian students don't show up at their ministry. In a post-Christian culture, skepticism about church and religion is at an all-time high. And sometimes the best thing you can do is plan something fun for students just so they can invite their non-Christian friends, and those friends can see that Christians know how to have a good time too. And when they know you and trust you, those friends are more likely to come to something else you're doing in the future that might have a more spiritual emphasis. You could consider it pre-evangelism. Strategy number 4, encourage your students to share with their non-Christian friends. So I'm very interested in actually equipping students to share their faith, not just to extend invitations to your church. And to that end, one of the best tools that I've come across to help them do that is Doug Field's Friendship Evangelism cards. I was introduced to this tool many years ago when Doug came to Liberty University to do one of his purpose-driven youth ministry seminars, and I've used it ever since. It's not enough to ask your students to invite their friends or share their faith. You have to actually equip them with a plan and a process. The Friendship Evangelism card does exactly that. So it's your move. You want your ministry to grow. You wish your students would invite their non-Christian friends. Not for the sake of numbers, I get it. You want to make a difference. You want to see Jesus show up in as many students' lives as possible. But for that to happen, you have to be strategic. You have to encourage your students in these 4 ways. Encourage them to pray for their non-Christian friends. Encourage them to bless their non-Christian friends. Encourage them to invite their non-Christian friends. And encourage them to share with their non-Christian friends. That's how you keep your group open, and that's how your group will grow. Once again, if you've enjoyed this video and you think these kinds of conversations are helpful, I'd encourage you to subscribe down below, and I'll see you on the next video.